Let's continue our reading of session 67 in the second part where we still talk about psychic attacks. Let's begin. So far in this session, we have discussed the psychic attack from different points of view, and we've actually got a lot of rich information in terms of how this seeming contradictory desire of service from the creator, for the creator, between creators or co-creators develops a kind of paradox between what we want to do and what others want us to do and what is required for us to do, and this whole dilemma. And I want to cover that before we start again, because it was a really important question in the session, question 11. So we'll start with that. But so far what we have covered is essentially the phenomenon of psychic attack within the raw contact. And of course, there's an extrapolation of that for us. There's a couple of good answers here that helps to continue to put together the mechanisms, if you will. I don't like that word too much, but it's the best one I could use, that lie behind the consciousness of the self and the incursions that negative entities can do within ourselves, the weak points, and so on. So we're going to get into some of that, and I promise you some of the answers are really, really enlightening for and the reason why I use the word, or I choose the word enlightenment is or enlightening for us, is because you see there's a lot of spiritual jargon out there, which is, to a degree, it's true, but it doesn't speak from the highest wisdom. See? Now, what is the highest wisdom? Why would I even dare to say that? If there's everything is subjective and so on. No, the highest truth is that we're all one. And the most realistic thing to say is that we can actually live from this sense of unity. This is what's called enlightenment. So, to trace back to what I said, that there is a lot of spiritual jargon out there in terms of how negative entities work, and you are in danger, and you must trust that your energy is within you and it leaks out, and all of this. This is as true as saying that the ego is a real thing. To a specific concession of teachings, it is quite correct to say to people, yes, the ego is real and you must face it. But that is a trick which all teachers in history have used to bait the student into getting into the highest teachings. Now, I prefer to go straight language. That's how I like to speak. So in this straight language, I'm saying that we don't have to get into the idea that there are negative entities that are attacking us and we need to shield ourselves. This makes sense. The moment you start thinking this way, that's the moment where separation occurs. And it's actually okay to live in separation. We all live in separation. But if you want to continue to expand your consciousness to the highest wisdom, which is the wisdom of unity. And how is that possible? Is that possible? Yes, my friends, it is. And this is what the highest teachers, of course, have tried to impart to us, and Ra not being something different, of course. So we're going to get into that. But first, before the introduction, or after this introduction, let me just reread some of the words here in, let me go back to question 11. This question was, there's a couple of things that I think are important to mention again here. And it's the paradox, just to briefly summarize, the paradox that seems to exist between people asking you to do a certain thing For example, as Ra explains here, people who don't want you to be involved in spirituality because your family is religious, and they cannot bear you to be, you know, reading materials from, say, the Gnostic Gospels, which is, you know, it's heretic. It's been heretic for thousands of years, so you shouldn't read that. Or maybe getting into the Ra contact, which is demonic because it's a channeling, and all channelings for certain people are demonic. Or you're worshiping an entity, and you know, deep inside you know that you're not worshiping anything. You're just following a philosophy that makes sense to you, and you know that'd be the case. So, how do we deal with people who ask us from their hearts not to do things, and yet we want to do it? This is the paradox that seems to exist, and all you have to do is bid them well and say, basically, you know, this is what I do, this is what I like, this is me. I cannot suppress who I am. Ross says in question 11, you do not have two opposite requests for service. You always have the service of the Creator being requested of you, but you are the discerning point. You are the Creator deciding what type of service do I want to give. And so Ross says you will find an infinite array of contradictory requests for information or lack of information from this source if you listen carefully to those whose voices you may hear. This is all one voice to which you resonate upon a certain frequency. It's the same voice of the Creator asking you to be on their frequency. And sometimes people would say, yes, please explain to me better, you know, these Buddhist sayings that you know so well, or what Jesus actually meant here in the New Testament, or what about this New Age, we're all light, and so on. So you will find that they're trying to be in your same frequency, so they're asking information from you. And if you feel it, of course, then, you know, that's a service for you. But if people say, you know, stop reading those things, stop listening to these people, stop meditating is not the way, it's praying or whatever it is, then you don't feel it within you. Then you have all the rights to say, no, my service is this to the creation, and you continue to do what you want. So never be affected by what other people may think or say or ask you that is not congruent with who you are. It's my best advice, of course. And I think I'm just repeating something that your heart simply feels like, yes, Gabe, yes. And I know it's redundant, but sometimes we need to listen to it. As it happens, this group vibratory patterns. Okay, I won't repeat that part. See, I love this is the paragraph that I wanted to get at in question 11, when they say a portion seemingly of the Creator rejoices at your choice to question us regarding the evolution of spirit. This is in the context of the raw material, as they were contacting or using the raw contact to get information. A lot of people were happy that they were doing this, so they were asking, yes, keep going. Just like in the example I mentioned of somebody asking you to explain things that you already know because they want to learn more. And yes, you know, you feel that they rejoice at your activity. Then a seemingly separate portion would wish for multitudinous answers to a great range of queries of a specific nature. This is the transient information, basically. You know, how do I find a boyfriend? You know, how do I solve my problems with a certain substance? You know, what can you recommend me to do that will help me with my relationship here? These specific questions that seek for the answer, and they're not seeking it within. So that's that. And then there's another one. They say, seemingly separate group of your peoples who wish this correspondence through the instrument to cease, feeling it to be of negative nature. And now the parallel for us here is that people will, you know, ask you, a couple of times I've seen comments in, I think, mostly my Spanish channel, I've heard or read, it's very few, maybe a couple of times since I started the channel, people saying that this is demonic, that I shouldn't be doing this, that I should go back to Christ, and all of that. Not knowing that this is all Christ. This is Christ consciousness. But you see people are limited between their own dogmas and their zealotry, basically. And that's fine. You continue to do what you do, and that's it. You don't look to the sides. Some people have actually commended me for doing this and exposing myself. I've never felt like I have exposed myself, to the public. I I just don't see myself that way. So I think it's interesting. I guess it's inspirational for some people, but to me, it's just me reading in front of a camera and expressing my thoughts. So yeah, you just do what you want. That's it. You don't have to do anything specific. Or people will urge you, like you have to be a messenger of God. And you say like, no, I just enjoy it for my own self. I don't have to go open a channel or start a podcast or any of that, unless you really desire it and you're just blocked inside. But yeah. All right, so I wanted to give that introduction. I think I skipped a question here. Why did I do that? Here we go. All right, so we can start with this. Apologies for the long introduction, but it's a good refresher for what the paradox of the different services that we may be requested or we may feel from people, and how do we deal with that? How do we deal with two different groups of people or two different people asking for different services, and we wanting to please them? You're not a people pleaser. You're just somebody who enjoys living and doing what they do or what you do. So anyway, okay. I feel like I'm talking too much. And we have a lot to talk about. So let's go to question 12, where Don says, this particular entity is able to create, with its service, a dizzying effect on the instrument. Could you describe the mechanics of such a service? Ross says, this instrument, in the small times of its incarnation, had the distortion in the area of the otic complex of many infections, which caused great difficulties at this small age, as you would call it. The scars of these distortions remain, and indeed, that which you call the sinus system remains distorted. Thus, the entity works with these distortions to produce a loss of the balance and a slight lack of ability to use the optic apparatus. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, otic or otic. Somehow in Spanish that sounds a lot more understandable, because it has to do with the balancing of yourself through the auditory system that we have, the channels and all of this. This is the reason why you get dizzy when you spin yourself, because if I remember correctly, this is probably from my teenagers that I heard this description is there's a liquid or something that maintains a sort of balance in you, and it gets like all dizzy. So even if you close your eyes and you open them, you're going to feel like there's a dizziness. So Carla had a lot of this. Oh, by the way, a couple of things. You know already that there's a timeline here that you can go through the timestamps and move through the questions. I just thought about that because I took a long time in the introduction. So if you want to skip to the specific questions, I make that all possible here because that just shows the love that I have for this channeling and the work that I do here. I just love my channel. I love you guys. Is it too early to say I love you? It's never too early or too late. Always remember that. So that is a reminder. Go navigate the videos through the questions. And also just a refresher that, of course, we're talking about Carla here and the distortions that she had. This is how the negative entity could do its shenanigans with Carla, because she had some distortions or weaknesses. So how did it happen? Well, Carla had damage in her ear canal systems and auditory system, and that is the way in which it creates the imbalance for dizziness. So these are the ways in which... Now, how does that happen? We'll find out soon. Question 13. Don says, I was wondering about the magical, shall I say, principles behind the fifth density entity giving this service and his ability to give it. Why is he able to utilize these particular physical distortions from a philosophical or magical point of view? Good question. Ra says, this entity is able to, shall we say, penetrate in time-space configuration the field of this particular entity. It has moved through the quarantine without any vehicle, and thus has been more able to escape detection by the net of the Guardians. Let me just say a couple of things here. Okay, it's a really good question because, okay, philosophically or magically, how is this entity, the negative entity, fifth density negative entity, able to make its incursions into the physical complex of Carla? You know, what's the mechanic here? What's happening? Well, first, Ra says that this entity is able to penetrate the time-space configuration of the field of Carla, right? The auric field and the time-space body of Carla. So it can infringe upon her free will and do this for its specific purpose. They also say that they have moved through the quarantine without any vehicle, and thus has been more able to escape detection by the net of the Guardians. I don't know if I want to extend myself too long here, but I do want to leave the impression that, you see, these Guardians, if they were, just for you to see that these Guardians, they all have an agenda too. I'm not saying that they're evil. Please don't listen to me with human ears, but in the grand scheme of things, and now I'm talking about the whole creation, if you're guarding something, it's because you still believe that there's a sort of activity that we must do. See, I'm not challenging, of course, the positivity of guardians and the people who are doing all of this, but there's still a sort of conflict or friction in this level of consciousness, this level of mind. And so for an entity to escape detection by the net of guardians, you know, it's a lot. I like I said, I can go on for a while here and talk about how this is a polarized view still. It seems to me. I may be wrong. Maybe I'm just an ignorant in how all of this works metaphysically. But yeah, if there was a really net of guardians there, there's another mechanism that comes into play here, which is the quarantine and the balancing effect. So I don't know, it just makes a little bit of noise to me that an entity was able to escape the detection by the net of guardians. Are they vulnerable, or do they allow this? But if there was a detection and they were able to escape that, they were able to escape that detection, what's going on? Are they, I don't know. I really don't know. But it does show that there is a sort of permeability in the mind of these guardians and everything else. Where are these guardians from? What density? I forget. I don't know if they're from 4th, from 5th. Maybe that's their learning. What is safe to say is that the logos is with true neutrality, and everything that is happening is part of its own learning, or its contribution to the grand central sun of learning. I know I'm going way off track here, but I wanted to mention all of this, that even within the workings of the Confederation, let me just give an example. Ra, for starters, they're still learning. They're still making mistakes, let's call them in human terms. They just see opportunities for learning. Well, these are opportunities for learning of the Guardians, meaning that they are still sort of part of the evolution. So it's just a reminder of that a lot of these entities and Guardians and Confederations and so on, they're all in the process of learning. I mean, the whole universe is in the process of learning, right? But the levels in which this is happening. I just wanted to mention that, because, I don't know, it may seem like some people say, well, we're being guarded, so we're all safe. Who's safe? The separate self? That's a good question. So I always like to bring this, into the light of unity and what is actually happening between all the turmoil of the evolution within the octave in this solar system. So anyhow, I feel like I'm rambling. Let's go with more of the answer that Ross says here in question 13. They say, this is the great virtue of the magical working, whereby consciousness is sent forth, essentially without vehicle, as light. The light would work instantly upon the untuned individual by suggestion. That is, the stepping out in front of the traffic, because the suggestion is that there is no traffic. This entity, as each in this group, is enough discipline in the ways of love and light that it is not suggestible to any great extent. So, a lot of speculation here we can get, but let's just go with the mechanics of what's happening. First, the fifth density entity is penetrating or is able to work within the field of Carla. That's because she had some weaknesses there. And so they do it without vehicle. Let's remember that part for question 15, I think. Essentially without vehicle. Maybe that's the key phrase, essentially without vehicle. So they move their consciousness. They move with consciousness through the quarantine, and the light would work instantly upon an untuned individual by suggestion. The way in which they do suggestion, it's a very interesting thing, and I'll get to that at the end of this answer. But that's what they're doing. They're working towards the suggestion of our psyche to do things or to act in ways that are incongruent with what we actually want to do, with our true nature. That's the negative action, right? Or suggestion. So they say, step in front of the traffic, because the suggestion is that there is no traffic. Oh, traffic's clear, let me just walk, and you get run over by a car. But Carla was enough discipline in the ways of love and light that she wasn't suggestible to any great extent. In this way, of course. And I'll give some examples of this. You will relate. So this is how it works. They go through, if you remember from last video, first part of this session, space-time fifth density, they move into time-space fifth density, they travel in consciousness to third density time-space, and then from third density time-space they work within the field of Carla in this case, and it causes a physical or space-time reaction. So with that, they work through suggestions, and I'm not sure how they cause pain, because they do cause pain, somehow influencing the entity to do things, because all they do is suggest things. This helps them to not break the law of responsibility, the first distortion, the law of free will. So there's more to say here. Roth finishes and says, however, there is a predisposition of the physical complex which this entity is making maximal use of as regards the instrument, hoping, for instance, by means of increasing dizziness, to cause the instrument to fall, or to indeed walk in front of your traffic because of impaired vision. The magical principles, shall we say, may be loosely translated into your system of magic, whereby symbols are used and traced and visualized in order to develop the power of the light. Wow, that sounds all esoteric. It's not so much once I pair it with experience. And I hope you have this experience, because I'll tell you why I'm laughing. Okay, so there's a predisposition of the physical complex in Carla, which the entity, the fifth density negative entity, they make use of, which is the dizziness or the impaired vision in all of this, because they wanted to kill Carla. They wanted Carla to cease the contact. So it's like the people who beg you not to do things. Please don't do it. Please don't do it. It's going to bring demise to me. Like your mom used to be when you went out as a teenager and spent the night somewhere, or went to parties, or went to the disco. I'm sorry, I was raised in a different country, so at 15 I was inside clubs and all of that. So thanks to my older brother. Thank you. Thank you, G. So yeah, your parents would freak out. Actually, my mom didn't freak out because I was my older brother. But you get the picture. So people begging you not to do things. That's sort of the same thing that they're doing here. They're begging Carla to die so she could cease in the transmission and reception, actually the reception of the channeling, the information here. There are several reasons why they wanted that. And I'll get to that too. Now, this is what I wanted to offer you, and that's why I was laughing. The magical principles, how this works. They may be loosely translated into your system of magic, whereby symbols are used and traced and visualized in order to develop the power of the light. I've made this. I thought that everybody had these thoughts because I've asked a lot of people and they say like, "Oh yeah, I've had similar thoughts," but I've had other people who never had this thought. So I call it the kitchen and the knife experience. If you're with somebody, I know I'm a psychopath. I do get the symbols. I have negative entities around me. What can I tell you? If you have a knife in your kitchen and somebody else is around, have you ever got the thought? It's not to, you see, it's a sort of image of what the knife can do to somebody else, or push somebody, or these. I remember my mom used to say like, "That's the devil," tempting you to do evil things. So true. She was so right. Not the devil as an entity, but these are the negative entities showing you in your psyche things that you may do. So this is the suggestion, the influence that they may have. And again, maybe I'm susceptible to this kind of stuff. Maybe I have some sort of susceptibility in me. Perhaps I've done it in previous lives, so it's just like a memory to me to just imagine these things. I don't know. I feel strange. Please somebody comment on this video so I feel better. But I'm not the only one who has these thoughts of the kitchen knife when somebody's around. I mean, I don't have them all the time, but you see, it's one of those things. Maybe it's something else, like yelling at somebody, but you don't, or punching somebody, but you don't. All of these are negatively influenced. So you see, you don't have to think that there is a negative entity flying around or within me that has. It's all perception. So the negativity is really the permeability that exists within your auric field to at least consider these possibilities. But your choice is what really matters. I haven't stabbed anybody in my life yet. I'm kidding. I don't think I'll ever do it. But you see, I don't. It's the choice, you never. Of course, at this point, it's just like, why am I even having these thoughts? It's like so unaligned with you. So these are real things. I'm glad that these things are happening. And that I have actually, let me confess something. I've actually hurt people physically, and when it should have been, a pleasurable thing or a pleasant encounter, I've hurt people physically. And I'm not ashamed of it. You see, because, of course, what shame is. It's just a stupid regret that we feel like we have to carry with you. But you forgive yourself and never make that mistake again. So I'm glad of that because I know by experience what it is to be, evil, what it is to be hurtful to people. So, I don't even like to say I'm not perfect. I know I'm perfect because I know who I am. But the expression, the manifestation of myself needs to be imperfect. So I deal with that imperfection, and I'm okay with that. I am aware that of my perfection within my apparent imperfections. And I'm grateful for that. This is the gratitude that one must have with all the negative things that, are still worrying us. That's just negativity there. And it's really the choice in how you decide to act that makes the difference and polarizes you. You see? So yes, it just reminds, the last thing I would say is the Dalai Lama, one of them, I don't know, I think it's one of the recent ones, perhaps the current one. He had to be explained what is self-hatred because he couldn't understand that. Of course, in his experience, he's never experienced self-hatred, so he doesn't know what it is. And he literally had to have somebody, or self-hatred or self-deprecation or something that is just worthlessness. And to him, that was just like such a foreign concept. He couldn't even understand it. You see? So, oh, I want to be like the Dalai Lama. Why? Why? You have your own experiences and you're here to deal with them. So, I'm grateful for not being unaware of things that are so real in the world. And so I deal with them. Okay, enough of me. Let's go. Question 14. Don says, do you mean that this fifth density entity visualizes certain symbols? I am assuming that these symbols are of a nature where their continued use would have some power or charge. Am I correct? Ross says, you are correct. In fifth density, light is as visible a tool as your pencil's writing. Then Don says in question 15, then am I correct in assuming this entity configures the light into symbology, that is what we would call a physical presence? Is this correct? Ross says, this is incorrect. The light is used to create a sufficient purity of environment for the entity to place its consciousness in a carefully created light vehicle, which then uses the tools of light to do its working. The will and presence are those of the entity doing the working. Wow, this is perfect and beautiful to finish my explanation. First of all, there seems to be a contradiction here when they say in question 13, and this is why I said remember that, when they said they don't use a vehicle and they trespass through the quarantine, right? They said no vehicle is used. Yet they say here that they use a carefully created light vehicle. Okay. Which then uses the tools of light to do its working. I'm going to reread it, attempt to clarify the contradiction in the vehicle use, and then explain to you how this works in a beautiful part. Okay. Ah, it's so beautiful. I can see it. I hope to make you visualize it. So, how are they doing this work within ourselves? Let's get to it. First of all, Don's question was that he was assuming the entity configures the light into symbology. That is what we call a physical presence. And I don't think that is a physical presence at all, because they're not creating a vehicle for them to manifest here, but rather using their consciousness to project their own will, their own personality. Should I put it like that? That makes sense, right? No? Okay, let's get into the explanation. Ross says, the light is used to create a sufficient purity of environment for the entity to place its consciousness in a carefully created light vehicle. That light vehicle to me is the environment that they created. So it's like created a canvas, right? Which then uses the tools of light to do its working. So it's a projection, let's say the canvas of imagination. It's projected into the consciousness or the perception of the entity, in this case the 3D entity. And so they use the tools of light, and if you remember from the past answer where they say that they use light as a pencil, we use it here. They draw with light. So they draw this image of you doing something questionable, by your own being. And sometimes they would definitely use it when you're angry, or when you're depressed, and when you're doing all of this. They are attacking you in this way. They are infringing upon your free will. I wouldn't even say infringement. I'm not even sure if that's infringement, because all they're doing is suggestion. Like the friends that they are. When you have bad influence, bad friends that make you want to do things, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're just suggesting to you Yes, jump on that off of that cliff, and you, in your free will, say yay, and you do it. So they're painting in front of you, in your own psyche, these images of you doing things that are questionable to your own self, the polarized positive self. Now, check the part when they say the will and presence are those of the entity doing the working. It's not yours. Meaning, it's not your projection of the true being that you are. It's their will. It's their presence. Is just like in the example of the kids telling you, jump off that cliff. It's their will and presence who's saying, you do it. You go do it. They're imposing that into you, suggestion. They're not pushing you. They're not sending you by physical means. They're suggesting that to you, and you're doing it. So you have to be very aware of all those things that once you have the tools of the ego and, ahimsa, which is the word that we use in Buddhism for non-harm, non-harmfulness, just living in peace, not harming other people and animals and the environment. So once you have these tools, you're able to discern what is it that is the true path. Hurting people, stabbing people in the kitchen, pushing somebody, punching them, hurting them verbally, abusing them, raping them, violating them in so different ways. You see, all of this is the work of negative entities that are imposing their will and presence in you. Why? Because they want you to do their bidding. That's simple as it is, and as soon as you start this path, it's easier for you to continue to commit crimes and commit all kinds of adultery and all sort of negative things. Let's just put it that way. Negative behaviors, negative actions. So, just like you start working for these entities, you can stop working for them and getting into yourself and saying, all right, truthfully who I am. Do I want to continue to polarize in the negative or into the positive? You have to make that decision consciously. And actually, if you're negative, I would suggest to you that you go and control these entities, because you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. As Ross says, you can actually bid them. If you forgot this, it's in the session 50s, I think. There's a part where they discuss this, but the 3D entity can actually enslave the negative entity. Mostly 4th density, I'm thinking. I don't know, 5th density, but who knows? Because they're playing the game, and if they're playing the game and you outwit them, you can actually dominate them. So again, that's my advice for anybody who's negative out there. We're all serving the creators, so thank you for whatever you do. Okay, so that's it. I hope this makes sense. I'm telling you, please pay attention to this paragraph, because this is the true nature, the source of why we have these negative thoughts. It's not you, okay? It's not you in the sense of the polarized positive being that you are, the way that you see yourself as a pure being. It's not really you. It's the negative entities putting those images in you so you can go and do it, because they want you to work for them. But you don't work for anybody. You don't even work for yourself, because you don't exist. You simply radiate the peace and harmony of this creation when you're one with everything. And that's my sincere desire for anybody who follows me in any of my teachings, YouTube, Instagram, my course, my seminars, anything. Really, my true heart is in the desire for people to see through unity, because there's no highest teaching. Simple as that. It may be abstract for the mind, but we have to destroy the mind or dissolve the mind for us to assimilate this. Okay, so these are questions from book 5. I'll just go through them really quick. This is question 16. Don says, are you familiar with a book that the instrument and I wrote approximately 12 years ago called The Crucifixion of Esmeralda Sweetwater, in particular the banishing ritual used to bring the entities to Earth? Ross says, this is correct. Then Don says, were there any incorrectnesses in our writing with respect to the way this was performed? Ross says, the incorrectness occurred only due to difficulty an author would have in describing the length of training necessary to enable the ones known in that particular writing as Theodore and Pablo in the necessary disciplines. Don says, it has seemed to me that the book has somehow, in its entirety, been a link to many of those whom we have met since we wrote it and many of the activities we have experienced. Is this correct? Ross says, this is quite so. And that finishes the questions that were omitted in the original books. They were published in book 5 in the 90s. And Carla and Jim made comments about that in that book. So, as always, in the description, there are links for you to download the books if you don't have them. They're free in LL Research. You can also go to lawofone.info, which again, guess what? In the description. You can go check it out. And over there, you just have to go to the bottom and enable show commentary, show notes, show everything. Show everything, and you can select which of the versions you want to read. The original, raw contact, re-listen version, lightly edited. And I think that's it. So go check that out. Over there, you have to enable the show commentary so you can read the commentary that Carla and Jim had in book 5. So you can learn a little bit more about that. Now, from those commentaries, I can tell you that Carla and Jim talk about, more so Carla, because Carla is the one that wrote the book with Don, The Crucifixion of Esmeralda, Sweetwater. It's a book that I admittedly have not read, so I don't know who Theodore and Pablo are. It seems like a minor point, so I can't get into it too much. But essentially is that the only incorrectness in the book, as Don asked, was that the length of time that needs to be accomplished for whatever they were doing, the ritual. I won't read it again. It's longer than they described there, but everything else seems fine. And also, Don mentions in the last question that he has noticed that a lot of what happened there in the book is happening to them at this point, or has happened so far at this point in the raw contact. Why? Synchronicities, the nature of reality, and the non-linear aspect of time, which is an illusion needed for us to have an experience as humans and as aging entities. That is the purpose of space-time in all densities. All densities have a sort of decay of the body, and that is in order to reset the experience and repeat the experience as much as necessary so we can learn the lessons of each density. So, non-linear aspect of time is revealed there because this has happened to me too in very subtle way, not as much as this book, which seemed to have shown a lot of reality to what they were experiencing. But what they were finding was that all of this was happening to them. Carla expresses this nicely in book 5, so go read it if you want to. But this is the nature of reality. We think that with our thoughts we're not shaping reality. Sometimes we perceive things, and in my case, I remember writing things in which I sort of saw that this was an inevitable thing to happen, even though I didn't have connections to it. And they certainly start taking shape in that way. And synchronicities are possibly the best thing, because you can have a dream and then suddenly the dream comes true in a very abstract way, but it does come true. And you're familiar with all of this stuff, so I won't get much into it. In any case, let's go to question 19. Don says in question 19, I will ask about that in a later session, since I don't want to get off the track. Because it has something to do with the mechanics of time, which I'm very puzzled about. But I would ask then, the fifth density entity in coming here to offer us service, as you mentioned, penetrated the quarantine. Was this done through one of the windows, or was this because of his, shall I say, magical ability. Oh, you can see here in this question how Don was still puzzled about time. I would love to expand on that, but that's not necessary here. So, okay, how does it penetrate the quarantine? Ross says, this was done through a very slight window, which less magically oriented entities or groups could not have used to advantage. So, quickly here, I guess. See, this goes back to my question of how are the Guardians allowing a net to be, call it net, of light, and yet some entities can penetrate it. There's a reason why, and they explain it here, but that explanation seems to contradict this, oh, we didn't see it, they just penetrated without detection. The Guardians didn't detect it. So maybe it has to do with the higher mechanics that the Guardians don't know about and they're learning. I'm not sure. I'm only speculating here, but my point is to show that even those that we see as Guardians are learning, are part of this learning process in this particular sub-logos, which is the sun. And Ra explains that this was through a very slight window, which less magically oriented entities or groups could not have used to advantage. So this sounds like a fourth density negative entity could not have been able to do this, as they have more. You see, the fourth density negative is much less developed than a fourth density positive entity that is able to use thought to a degree higher than the negative for travel and all of this, because guess what? You're on track with unity, whereas the negative isn't. It's only have bigger problems. This is an extrapolation that I made, I must admit, from the explanation that Ra gives about travel. They say that negative entities still rely on, say, physical means for travel, whereas the positive entities in fourth density I'm talking about, they have they don't rely as much, or if any, in physical means, but they travel already by thought. They're learning this. So fourth density negatives are lagging in technology, believe it or not. Consciousness technology, of course, because you're in denial of the true nature of reality. It's so beautiful. I wish more people were into the law of one. Such a beautiful philosophy, and it explains so much, sophisticated and complicated as it may seem. Question 20. Don says, now, the main point of this line of questioning has to do with the first distortion and the fact that this window existed. Was this, shall I say, a portion of the random window effect? And are we experiencing the same type of balancing in receiving the offerings of this entity as the planet in general receives because of the window effect? Let's shine some light here, no pun intended. Ross says, this is precisely correct, as the planetary sphere accepts more highly evolved positive entities or groups with information to offer. The same opportunity must be offered to similarly wise negatively oriented entities or groups. You see, this is where I say that there is a higher explanation over the Guardians. The Guardians may be learning lessons of balancing or whatever it is that they're learning, but they're allowing fifth density negative entities to pass through. So they're wiser. They seem to be wiser than the Guardians, right? Now, here's what the wisdom of Ra says, and that's because Don was very inquisitive. And he asked the question, the proper question, is this because of the balancing effect that needs to happen? So maybe the Guardians are not aware of this balancing effect, or they are aware but they're still learning these effects, and they realize how they can do anything when there is a natural need of the planet. Maybe they're just there to guard against, I don't know, a landing, mass landing of positive or negatives, because they feel like, oh, we're here to enjoy fourth density with them, and then they say, oops, we didn't know they haven't polarized yet. Maybe that's what the Guardians are doing. And the fifth density negative entity is a lot more clever. So what is happening to me is that, as Ra says, yes, the reason why this negative entity infiltrated the Guardians is 1, because they're wiser, 2, because their call was needed. In other words, we're talking about the balancing of the planet. When a planet is mixed in its orientation, as our planet is, you see, we don't know what we want. So we need incentive. We need people to give us, or entities to give us direction. Now, because of our disorientation, there is a call for positive and negatives. The 1981 Ra contact was a positive contact, a channeling of pure information that needed to be balanced. No surprise that one of the attempts to balance this was to cease the contact, because as the light of wisdom, information, the intelligence of Ra was pouring into our planet, then a similarly negative, dark, shadowy aspect of reality must also be present. Their attempt was to finish the contact, to eliminate it. So this balances pretty well the amount of information that we were getting through the triad of Jim, Don, and Carla. So that makes sense, you see? And it kind of lends credence to my idea, it's just an idea, that the Guardians are not as wise as the negative entity, and they're learning through this portion of their job. Or, I don't know how else to explain it. That's my best attempt to guess it. But yeah, this also reminds us that the more we bring positive aid, that doesn't mean that we polarize positively. If we polarize positively, Gabe, does that mean that more negative entities can come? That is not true, because we as a planet decide to polarize positively. But the key here for balance is that as the unpolarized being requests information, then there must be a balance of options here. But when the person is determined and says, no thank you, I don't want negative influence, I am so devoted and my faith is so poured into the unity of the creation that I just seek positive light, whatever you want to call it, just pure acceptance of all that there is. That's really the end of the seeking and everything, just acceptance of everything. Understanding that you don't have to accept anything, because there's nobody to accept. There's only acceptance, and you are acceptance. Let me put it that way. So anyhow, let's move into question 21, where Don says, then we experience in this seeming difficulty the, what I would call, effect of the wisdom of the first distortion, and for that reason must fully accept the wisdom of that which we experience. This is my personal view. Is it congruent with Ra's? Ra says, in our view, we would perhaps go further in expressing a appreciation for this opportunity. This is an intensive opportunity in that it is quite marked in its effects, both actual and potential. And as it affects the instrument's distortion towards pain and other difficulties, such as dizziness, it enables the instrument to continuously choose to serve others and to serve the Creator. Now here Don is saying, first of all, it's Don's opinion that they should fully accept the wisdom of that which we experience. This is the negative attack, or the psychic attack that they were experiencing with Carla and others. We'll see that later on in this session. So Don is just saying, is your opinion similar to mine in that we should accept the wisdom of the negative entity? Let's just see what Ra says here. And is there a mistake in this slide, or is it in? It must be. That's strange. It's hard to find a grammar mistake. Oh, it is. Marked has a little tilde. I'll ask Toby Wheelock to remove it eventually. Little things. You see how rereading the raw material helps to correct very small mistakes? Let me show you what I mean. See where it says marked right there? That is a tilde. It shouldn't be there. I'm not even sure in which language that's used. Anyhow, in our view, we would perhaps go further in expressing appreciation for this opportunity. So not just accept the wisdom of the negative entity, but also show appreciation. So how can you be appreciative of the negative attacks? Well, we could go at it in different ways, but I have only the one. And I think that's my preferred method. This is an intensive opportunity in that it is quite marked. Isn't that funny? Marked. There's a mark on top of mark that shouldn't be there. I don't know what that means, but it's funny. In its effects, both actual and potential, and as it affects the instrument's distortions towards pain and other difficulties, such as the dizziness, it enables the instrument to continuously choose to serve others and to serve the creator. You know, I'm going to say that Ra's suggestion, because that's who they are, they fall short at saying, you just accept. They don't fall short. They just give suggestions that they should appreciate the pain and all of this, because it shows the difficulties that they can go through, and yet they can continue with the contact. They can continue serving the way they do. So it's almost like saying, that's fine, whatever people do to me, you're humiliated and you will continue to do it. Thanks to that humiliation, like it happened to David Icke. I'll never remember that. I thought it was a powerful speech where he says, I was humiliated in national TV, and that made me determined to continue on my path, because I said, I have nothing else to lose. I lost all my credibility. I lost all my my popularity. I lost all my image was destroyed. My ego, what I thought I was completely obliterated, and I continued on. So we can always use this as a way to empower our own path, and not, I'm being attacked. That means that I'm not good for this. I'm weak. I shouldn't continue doing this. No, you continue doing it despite what you have. You never give up. Let's put it that way. So that's a form of appreciation for the things that happen to you or that are done to you. Ross says and continues, similarly, it offers a continual opportunity for each in the group to express support under more distorted or difficult circumstances of others' self experiencing the brunt, shall we say, of this attack. That would be Carla, thus being able to demonstrate the love and light of the infinite creator. And furthermore, choosing working to continue to serve as messengers of this information, for this information, which we attempt to offer and to serve the creator thereby. Thus, the opportunities are quite noticeable, as well as the distortions caused by this circumstance. So continue to serve in the way that you're serving, and that is automatic acceptance of what is. You see, and that's what I was getting to with my suggestion. Another thing that they say here is they offer, say, Don and Jim to continue to give support to Carla, which is the one that's taking the brunt of the attack. So there's always a way to continue to give love and light to whatever's happening in the planet, in your house, at work. There's always that opportunity. Can you seek it? Can you see it first? That's the key point. And my point is that you should, not you are acceptance, like I said. You are this harmony, peace, love. So when the mind gets involved is when you start doubting, when you start, I don't know, should I do it? Should I not do it? This, that. Don't let the mind get involved. Just do what you feel. Act without action, previous action. That would be working without karma, just acting on what you want to do. Believe it or not. But am I going to do the right thing? No, you're doubting it now. So that's it. Just continue to do what you do. And that's how you work from unity, actually. You don't think, you just are. Okay. Let's go to question 22. I'm going to read a couple more and then we'll end it. Thank you. Is the so-called attack offered to myself and Jim as well as the instrument? Ross says, this is correct. Don says, I personally have felt no effect that I am aware of. Is it possible for you to tell me how we are offered this service? Ra says, the questioner has been offered the service of doubting the self and of becoming disheartened over various distortions of the personal nature. This entity has not chosen to use these opportunities. This is Don. And the Orion entity has basically ceased to be interested in maintaining constant surveillance of this entity. That's done. So he's been offered all of that. But they cease to bother Don. Then they say, the scribe is under constant surveillance and has been offered numerous opportunities for the intensification of the mental emotional distortions and, in some cases, the connection matrices between mental emotional complexes and the physical complex counterpart. As this entity has become aware of these attacks, it has become much less pervious to them. Lastly, they say, this is the particular cause of the great intensification and constancy of the surveillance of this instrument, for it is the weak link due to factors beyond its control within this incarnation. Let me just check first. Yeah, we'll finish it here. Since we have just remnants of this line of questioning, and then we'll get into more psychic reading, law of confusion, and archetypical minds. Exciting stuff. Okay, so all of these attacks, they were offered or given to the group for the ending of the contact. Now, Don had certain disheartening possibilities. He may be weak there, but because Don didn't pay attention to it, they were just like, meh, Don's not worth it. And then they went to Jim, and Jim continued to reinforce. Now, how does this happen? You see, the more you choose to do what is right for you, the more you choose to do what is within your heart, then, it's like people stop bothering you. When you're still doing questionable things and you're still doubting, and you attract these people that feel good because they feel also meaningless, they feel like it's unworthy to be, or to have, or anything. And so they hang out with you and you maintain these conversations. But once you change, once you stop saying like everything is crap, I'm whatever, I'm unworthy, this is all bullshit, and all this language that we use for expressing ourselves, then the more we attract these people, the more we attract the negative entities. But if we continue to use our our hearts, that's what I said, yes, then maybe they stop bothering us. Maybe the thoughts leave us. That's exactly what happens. The images, the thoughts, the perceptions of self, the ego starts dissolving. And that is, to me, the best path that we can have, the most express path to unity. So, end of this video. We have like 10 more questions or less. There's a long one, archetypical mind. Actually, a lot of archetypical mind. I have like 7 more questions. But that's it for this video. Conclusions. The importance of stating that the negative entities, first to understand that the negative entities are not separate from you. They are you. But depending on how you define you, you will have to see them as separate from you. Or you'll have to see them as part of this whole illusion of creation. If you think you're a soul that is in evolution, then that soul in evolution will have to inevitably confront the negative aspect of itself, which is the negative entity. If you think you're a person here in third density, then you will feel that way. So my teaching, the beauty of this realization of being one with everything is that you don't even have to think about yourself anymore. What's happening is what's happening. And you see, you don't put yourself in the middle between the happening and the happener, which is supposed to be you. There is just a happening. And just like you don't get involved in trying to push the person in the movie when they're going to commit a crime, or trying to alter the development of a story in a book. You don't write on top of the book and say, I don't like this. I'm going to rip apart these pages, which I don't know where they're going, and I'm just going to write my own thing. How exciting is that? It's not exciting at all. You are the observer. You are the creator. It's so difficult to say these words because it talks to the ego. And if the ego takes it, then it confuses it because it doesn't know what to do with the creator. The ego doesn't know what to do with that except polarize towards the negative. So when I say you are the creator, is like in my dream, I'm lucid and I'm talking to somebody and saying, dude, we're all in the same dream. It's the same dream. Relax. We're all the self. We're all this huge array of objects and people and thoughts and all of this. So you see, this is the best way to me in which we can perceive reality. You don't have to become like, the forces between light and dark and all of this. I have a huge discrepancy right now with the whole spiritual community, which is reinforcing. Well, first of all, it's not a discrepancy. Is an understanding that this is naturally a process of evolution of third density to fourth density. This whole holy war, the war between light and darkness. They are doing this to us. We must do this to sustain and defend from the hearts and the light and all of this. I'm not mocking it. I'm saying that this is the language that we use still in separation. So my discrepancy is only in that what I teach is not from fourth density. What I teach is not from fifth density either. What I teach is from unity. Unity starts from the sixth to the seventh. That is the lessons of sixth density. Now, I'm not saying that I am a messenger from sixth density. I'm saying that what I see, the way I see the world, is from unity. And that is, we are endowed with that. We're not, Gabe, we're only in third density, so I only have my solar plexus activated. I'm barely opening my heart. That's not true. You're able to use all of your energy centers to shine light upon yourself. This doesn't mean that you use your indigo ray, your third eye, to bypass all the rest, as some people do. Or use their heart to bypass all of their blockages and muddied relationships with the self and so on. No, you use this simply as a way of perceiving all of it. You see, it's a mistake to think that once you see things from unity, you have nothing else to work upon. You have nothing else to discern. Quite the contrary. This is, once you see from unity, you just see clear. You have no opaque window in which to see the world. There are no questions. You know who you are. Yet there are things that are still happening through your life that you may find resistance. So you go into what's called shadow work, but through the sense of unity, not from the sense of ego, which is what many of the teachings go through. They train the ego. They train it so hard that they dissolve it. And that's a way. I'm not saying that it's not a way. So I'm not trying to push my teaching or anything. I'm just showing that this is possible. It's not popular. It's not the thing right now, but it is the ultimate reality. It is what Jehoshua, whatever his name was. I have a friend who speaks Hebrew and studies the Kabbalah with the Law of One, and he knows the correct name. Jesus. Okay, for us it's Jesus in Spanish. This is what Jesus taught. This is what Gautama taught. And these are our greatest teachers. This is what Ra is teaching in the mystical teachings of the raw material. If you pay attention to it, every time they say you are one, you are the creator, you don't, if you just read it, it's always there. But in our collective consciousness, I understand and I admit that it's difficult to see the world this way. But I like the hard path. I like the difficult challenge. So this is what I do. If you're interested, of course, like I've always said, there's a link in the description which you can book a call with me and let's work together. I'm doing this. I'm working with people. I love doing this. Teaching one-on-one is something that is my passion. And I wish I can continue to do it for as long as I can. So I'm doing it now. I don't know for how long I'm going to do it, but right now you can just schedule a call with me. Free. We'll talk. We'll meet. I'll get to know what your problems are. We'll get to discuss all of this. Unity from the Law of One and from my non-dual teachings, which I cherish so much. And it's a practical thing. Last thing I would say about my teachings, you don't require anything of the Law of One. If you bring anything from the Law of One or any other mysticism, it's going to be a little bit redundant because I only use your own experience, what's happening through you at this moment, not really, densities and chakras and all of this. I feel like they confuse us in the simple basic teaching. I also say that this is kindergarten stuff. I'm not teaching high stuff, not college stuff. This is kindergarten because this is what we should have been taught as children. We should have been taught the reality of this reality. But now's the time to go through kinder. And because we have all the experience of all the other grades and all of that, we can understand better. Okay, so that's my spiel for today. I thank you again for being part of this and for listening to me all this hour long. I have nothing else to say, but thank you. I love you. I'll see you in the last part of session 67.